my children, and welcome back to Longbox of the Damned! It was not so long ago that you saw me in the bright sunlight of summer. But we opened this year's true festivities with something a bit colder, with grey skies and rain that never ends. Come with me, my children, to Silent Hill. Silent Hill Downpour was a video game a few years back, a quite enjoyable little adventure that, yes, had its issues, but was very much in the spirit of the best of the franchise. It told the story of Murphy Pendleton, a man trying to escape from prison for certain sins he committed while there. But it was, in many ways, the story of Anne Cunningham, the corrections officer who chased after him into the haunted town. So what horrors did she experience while there? Well, that's why we're here. For starters, did she also listen to the radio broadcasting Born Free on a continual loop? Actually, what we really see is her at first trying to retrieve Murphy Pendleton while separated by a cliff, and falling down the chasm of revenge. For those who don't know, Pendleton supposedly crippled her father, also a corrections officer, during a prison riot. And because of this, even when Pendleton offers her a hand to save her from the falling cliff, she can only see him as a monster. Anne, of course, survives her fall and travels into a mine shaft, finding many very frightening things for her, like a wheelchair and a bloody name tag for her father. As I said, her father was crippled by the riot, left basically a vegetable from the beating, and spent the remainder of his life confined to that wheelchair. He was so loving, so caring and wonderful to his daughter, that she would do anything to get her vengeance. She sees him everywhere, even in the other criminals who survived the crash. But the real monsters of the town have their own plans for things. Plans for those still in the town of Silent Hill. In many ways, Silent Hill is like a prison, my children. It is a place of containment, a place of punishment, a place of rehabilitation. Some see the opportunities before them and become better people, while others will never escape the choices they've made, forced to repeat them for all eternity. It's like a really bad memory you can't seem to shake. You either learn to live with it, to move past it, or it keeps coming back for more. And in the case of Anne, her desire for revenge, her caring more about her father than her own life, it has slowly destroyed her. It took away her marriage when she kept working on taking care of her father instead of letting a full nursing staff do so. It took away her dignity and self-respect when she slept with her boss so he could arrange a prison transfer for Pendleton to her prison. They don't go into detail about what they did, but needless to say, she did not feel clean afterwards. Eventually, if you played the game, we saw what really happened, that Pendleton was not guilty of that particular crime, something even Anne finds out. But the story is really about Anne, her own sense of guilt and shame, her desire for what she thinks will fix everything. But the thing is that, like the record played by DJ Riggs, they are never changed, because change, real change, requires courage and work. Imagine, if you will, a heavy rainfall with so much pouring down. Can you really be certain that every one of those drops is different? That perhaps it's not just the same rain coming down forever? If there is one flaw to the story, it does not give us a chance to expand a bit on the lore of the game. What were the sins of DJ Riggs and the mailman that kept them in the town? Are the monsters manifestations from all the people crawling through Silent Hill, or just one of them? What the hell is the deal with that wormhole thing that follows you around? Regardless of that, Silent Hill Downpour, Anne's story, still gives us more to the story. And when it comes to Silent Hill, And the Longbox itself, it is all about this story. The season of fear begins again, my children. Welcome to the Longbox of the Damned. Growling greetings, my children. We have spoken before of Marvel's horror line like Tomb of Dracula, but now we need to shine a spotlight on the Werewolf by Night. Our first introduction to the werewolf is when he is about to get mugged. The reflection of the moon is caught in the blade of the mugger, and it shines right onto Jacob Russell, who just turned 18 years old. What's interesting in particular about this comic is that for once we get to see into the mind of a more savage, feral werewolf, his confusion of his surroundings, and the call of the wild trying to get him to return to the forest. Poor Jacob thinks it is but a dream he had, but we know the truth, don't we? But of course, dreams are far away from his mind, and instead on his stepfather, who treats his mother poorly, and lets even his own chauffeur hurl abuse at her. During his birthday party, his call of the wild gets the better of him again, only barely spotting the chauffeur working on their car, before his vision blurs and fur spreads over his body and sees his own reflection, showing his wolf-like appearance. After fighting a lone wolf, jealous of its own ability to be completely in the animal world, hunting and biting and clawing and, well, just running forever. But in the werewolf form, he is an animal now. And death is the beginning and end of his understanding. And speaking of death, when he finally returns to normal and goes home, he learns that his mother has been critically wounded in a car accident. She had gone off looking for the boy, and later at the hospital, she explains that she knows of his curse. Jacob's real father was a man she had met abroad in the Baltic states, even marrying him and living in their family castle. Once a month, the man would lock himself away in the tower for a trilogy of days and a trilogy of nights. She later discovered the truth, his werewolf nature, before he was shot by people of the village. The curse is hereditary and, of course, has passed on to Jacob, possibly even to his sister as well. She makes the boy promise to honor his stepfather, but it's at that moment that she dies, and the wolf takes over. It connects the dots, realizing that his stepfather conspired to murder her and seeks out vengeance. After dealing with the rather strong chauffeur, who apparently is a random citizen who can kick a werewolf's ass, he spots his stepfather approaching, speaking. But the stepfather's voice is cracked, as if he was not here of his own joy, and possibly even indicating that he wasn't guilty. And the words of his mother keep him from taking revenge, justified or not. The werewolf by night did not have the answers he sought. Not that it mattered to him now. To the man who was now a wolf. Werewolf by Night is a glorious tale in the best traditions of werewolf lore. Just keep the thought in the back of your minds, my children. How well do you know your lineage? Perhaps you have some howling ancestors of your own. Witchy welcome, my children! You would think that today's comic would just be an adaptation of the famous found footage film, but it is so much more than that. Behold the stories within the story. The legend of the Blair Witch. What we have here is an anthology of sorts. Within the movie, there were tales told about the Blair Witch legend, her appearances throughout history. and this comic expands upon them. The first is the origin of the witch herself, in a tale entitled Ellie Kedward's Curse. Ellie Kedward was a girl born with a curse, one her family recognized and tried to teach her to suppress. However, such a curse leads to tragedy. 7 attempts at children lead to miscarriages, and a husband lost at war showed that off. She fled to the village known as Blair, hoping to avoid bringing harm to anyone else. She lived in peace, for a time anyway, but eventually children began to mock her and formed a little story about her to explain why they were out late at night. And eventually she was accused by the town of witchcraft, beaten and burned by the foolish inhabitants, and Ellie finally gave in to her curse. She ascended to her spiritful witch form and found new children to replace the ones she had lost. The next story is sometime later, now that Blair has been renamed Burkittsville. This is She Needs Me, Coffin Rock. A little girl is lured out into the woods by a spectral form that takes her doll. Or does it? Eventually, people search for the missing girl, who is now fully possessed by the witch, and whom she gladly takes her revenge upon the men, descendants of the ones who made her what she is. The girl carves them up and arranges their bodies in a circle around the stick figure of the legend. And the girl is sent home, told what to say, and no one ever finds those bodies. But hey, she got her dolly back, so I think everything evened out. And finally we have Left Alone, the Rustin Parr killings. Rustin Parr was but a simple woodsman who wanted nothing more than to mind his own business and enjoy life in his cabin. But he was obviously not alone, for he shared the woods with the witch, who was all too happy to have him claim children for her. She tormented the man until he relented, promising to leave him alone only if he did as she asked. He took the children, gave them toys to try to comfort them, before he began to mutilate their bodies. He took 2 at a time, one standing in the corner facing away where he worked on the other. He did not want them to witness, you see, the things she was making him do. One final child was left, but not killed. Ellie just wanted her children back, you see, and he was finally left alone. For him to confess his crimes and to never let his own soul see what he had done. The Blair Witch Project, regardless of how you feel about the film itself, produced in this comic a lore of horror that I can share with you. But don't you worry, my children. I will never tell you to stand in the corner and look away. Late night greetings to you all, my children. Do you have a problem that needs investigating? Something with a supernatural bend? Then perhaps you should give a call to the Night Owls. The Night Owls was one of the series created for Zuda Comics, a short-lived webcomic imprint created by DC of all things. While Zuda went defunct several years ago, this story still remains to be enjoyed. The book is a combination of a Gaga day strip and ongoing storyline revolving around our 3 heroes. Professor Ernest Baxter, who is allergic to sunlight and can only conduct his cases in the light of the moon. Flapper Mindy Marcus, and her silver knuckles for those of the werewolf bent. And finally the gargoyle Roscoe, who causes mischief and, well, mischief. They are frequently summoned by the police to investigate the occult problems of New York City in the roaring 20s with villainous individuals like Mr. U, who will literally steal your face and wear it as his own. It also turns out that faces can just be pulled off like rubber masks and put back on again when you get them back. Truly in the spirit of Halloween. But then there are those like a group of vampires who believe that Professor Baxter is a vampire who hunts their own, when in reality he has his own reasons for remaining out of the sun. And in a world where supernatural events are more commonplace, is anyone surprised to find a war between gangsters running speakeasies, one with his own banshee to wail upon his enemies, while the other wields a magic pipe to dispense with his foes? While the comic is normally shown in sepia tones to help match the mood a bit, there is a storyline where they travel to Mindy's true homeland. Turns out the flapper is a princess of a magical kingdom in another dimension. Not that she was aware of it. And in this land, everything is in full color. Mindy herself does not really fit in with the more regal environment on the expectation for her to act ladylike, as it were, especially when she is the only one with the smarts on how to slay a dragon. But of course, with all of these kinds of interdimensional antics, there are also interpersonal dramas. It's not really my kind of thing, unless someone is biting down on someone else's neck for their blood, but hey, some people like that kind of thing. What does interest me, though, is when the ghost of Ichabod Crane comes by to warn Baxter that the Headless Horseman is riding that night, and he seeks Baxter's head to be his new one. See, relationship stuff is one thing, but riders on horsebacks with pumpkins for heads? That is a thing that truly gets my undead heart a-beating. The Night Owls embraces everything fun and adventurous about horror and folklore, my children. Also the fun of faces being ripped off. The night summons us, my children! It is time to complete the Batman Vampire Trilogy. We have seen the Dark Knight get fangs, and then use those fangs to kill. But if he was killed off at the end of Bloodstorm, how is he coming back now? We begin with Batman still staked in his grave, describing what it is to be dead, to be conscious in darkness, awareness but immobility, thirsty for blood but unable to move. This is true damnation for the undead, to be trapped forever, conscious in the realm of the living, but never being able to do anything about it. It is horror, my children, constant suffering and the inability to escape from it. Unless, of course, your faithful butler, having nightmares of your damnation, decides to pull the stake free from your black heart. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You see, the Batman vampire story, as you could tell from last time and its new origin of Catwoman, does not take place in a world where all of Batman's villains had already arrived. No, while some like Poison Ivy and the Penguin are at large, ones like Two-Face are only now being born. But Two-Face is more of a crime lord. What about other monsters, Like someone who appreciates the more frightful fancies like Scarecrow. Or, of course, the more inhumanly appearance of Killer Croc, mutilating bodies that he feasts upon. In the wake of Alfred's nightmares, unconcerned from Commissioner Gordon over the new crime wave from supervillains, Alfred pulls the stake from Batman's corpse. But this is not the same man as before. It seems Batman would have been truly vanquished if they had cut off his head, but instead he has been driven slightly mad from his bloodlust, berating Alfred for what he has foolishly unleashed. However, things have gotten so bad that Alfred does not care, even offering his own blood if it will help. But Batman refuses temptation and transforms himself into the titular Crimson Mist, escaping into the night. But of course he still needs blood, and he already believes himself a monster, so he plays the role handed to him, attacking the Penguin and taking a good chunk out of his neck. He attacks the Penguin's entire organization, feasting on the blood of evildoers. One by one, they fall to the darkest night, forcing even the criminals to offer an alliance with Gordon in the hopes of ending the Batman. The good cop rejects that offer, but Batman was watching, wondering to himself if he let them live because he too secretly wants to die again. Indeed, even as Gordon finally caves in and joins forces with Two-Face and Killer Croc, laying out their plan, Batman pays one final visit to his librarian friend to ask if vampires can finally be put to rest, but even she is uncertain. The trap is sprung. Batman is eventually pierced by an arrow stake, but Two-Face is, well, two-faced and decides to off Gordon and Alfred when it appears Batman is finished. The two make a valiant stand, Gordon dealing with Two-Face's goons, while Alfred eventually finds the wounded Batman again, once more offering his blood so that the Commissioner can be saved. This time it is accepted, and Batman fights one last battle, not for redemption, but for his duty. But even as Two-Face and Croc are finally defeated, Batman's vampire instincts are too overpowering, and he screams for Gordon to either join him or kill him. And thus the final trap is set, the cave of the vampire Batman destroyed, and beautiful sunlight rages down, killing the Batman once and for all. Also, the cave-in kills Gordon, so that kinda sucks for him. Batman Crimson Mist ends the trilogy well, my children. Batman was born in tragedy, and so he dies in it as well. Hello, my creepy little children! Yes, as is our tradition, it is time for us to take a look at another issue of the finest in illustrated horror. Here are some anecdotes of affectionate abominations in Creepy. Our first little tale is Skinny. No, it's not about anyone's weight. It's a nickname given by a poor, lonely little boy to the little creature he found. His parents are never around, and he's bullied at school by a little jerk named Jimmy. Skinny was all alone and needed help, and so our little boy, our little Martin, befriended the creature. Oh, and Skinny is such a good friend, so loyal and loving, but he's always hungry. And when he can't eat what Martin gives to him, he gets sick. He craves so many things though, and what he's hungry for is meat. And Jimmy really shouldn't be picking on other people, lest he wants to be picked clean. And speaking of precious pets, we then move to the tale of Bowser. We have a much happier boy in this story, with a pet that's pretty good about taking care of itself, what with its ability to shoot out its tentacles to eat any rats that come into the basement. He also might eat visitors who come by. Avon calling! Oh, but he had already eaten. Now, Bowser, if you get too aggressive, you may need to be put to sleep. But little Timmy couldn't bear to lose his pet, so he sets him free into the wild. But of course, Bowser is such a good little pet that he can't bear to leave, and we'll soon learn why he's been so moody lately. He was about to have tentacle offspring. Next on our animalistic offerings is Warto. You know, some people will do anything to belong, to be a part of something bigger. Take this girl, for instance, so lonely and apart from people. But she's got her skittery friends. They are growing so big these days. Why, just like last story, they even seem to be working on reproducing. But be careful how close you get to your newfound friends. You never know what they might adopt from you, what they'll take from you to become part of themselves. And of course, while those were all the main offerings, Creepy had its share of showing off the Creepy family's less seen members, their cat and dog. The cat is the king of the area, of course, and it is best not to try to overthrow the king. And then there's the happy dog, who likes to bury bones in the yard, particularly if they have been taken fresh from the mailman. Now this is what I call a real pet shop of horrors, my children. But, well, we'll get to that again on another day. Infested Invitations, my children! 2 years ago, we looked at an interdimensional zombie invasion spanning multiple franchises. So, let's see how that finished up, shall we? We have already seen this zombie plague, one capable of even infecting robots, spread to the worlds of G.I. Joe and the Transformers. Where else could it go? Well, how about the world, or galaxy as it were, of Star Trek? A short time after the events of the motion picture, Kirk, Spock, McCoy and some red shirts are on their way to a colony to see Dr. McCoy honored for some medical thing he did. However, the colony has already become overrun by the zombies, and soon all of the red shirts are infected. Red shirts attacked and killed on a mission? This is so unlike Star Trek. Eventually, the 3 Starfleet officers make their way to a laboratory where the infection came from. There, they find some helpful robots who explain what happened. That Brit, the vampire/zombie hybrid who had been spreading the infection, came to the head scientist on this world, claiming to be there to help with his research in robotics. Instead, she helped spread the zombie plague. Fortunately, with their data and the genius of Dr. McCoy and Mr. Spock, they're able to create a cure. Of sorts. The plague is still in the colony, but dormant. And sadly, their physical appearances cannot be reversed, and they are forced under quarantine. But still, the infection in the Star Trek universe is contained. But how about a zombie plague for people who are used to fighting different dead people, The Ghostbusters have been working overtime lately, dealing with a unique form of poltergeists that have been ravaging New York. These poltergeists are unique in their own right, not able to be trapped in the containment unit without springing a leak. And such a leak has occurred. Right at the same time zombies begin appearing in the city. Oh, what scientific study Egon has of these creatures? The undead spirits possessing them, utilizing traps to revert the zombies to necrotic slime. And of course, what escaped from the containment unit. Gozer the Gozerian in Stay-Puffed marshmallow form. Brit arrives and tells the Ghostbusters some of the details of things, getting them enough information to fight off Gozer, but her true mission is to obtain a sample of Gozer's essence, which she succeeds in, while her zombies go and attack Mr. Stay-Puffed. A combination of released poltergeists, zombie tissue, and the ghostly energy of Gozer all cancel each other out, defeating Gozer once more, for the time being. And finally we arrive back in the comic CVO, where this all started. Things are not going well for the covert vampiric operations. The world is overrun by zombies, and the CVO response team that started this whole mess is about to be nuked. Fortunately, they are able to escape with their hides intact and with an unconscious Brit, hoping they can use her knowledge of the Undermind, the hive being that drives the zombies, to repel the invasion. Unfortunately, she awakens and recalls her avatars from the other universes, becoming even more powerful. As she summons the Undermind directly into their universe, CVO's last chance is to create a being just like Brit, half vampire and half zombie. Their vampire agent Cross volunteers, getting himself some demon blood as well, to help increase his strength and keep the Undermind's influence out. Cross grows powerful enough to alter the laws of magic on their earth, rendering Brit and the Undermind powerless and completely dead. Victory is achieved, but at what cost? And is this truly the end? Well, not really, but there was an infestation too. But that's a story for another day, my children. For now, just be glad that all your beloved franchises haven't had a bite taken out of them. Dreamy delights for you, my children. Harlan Ellison is a figure to be frightened of. He suffers no fools and writes great prose. He even had a comic anthology for a bit. And in these issues, they adopted a terrifying tale of his. It is after the apocalypse, my children, and there are now but a handful of survivors left. But this apocalypse is a unique one. They are the last humans alive on Earth, only because the supercomputer, that destroyed the world, keeps them alive as a form of torture. Yes, it keeps them alive, despite age. They are all in pristine, if starved, shape, and has the power to manipulate their bodies. One, Benny, has been deformed into a freakish ape-like being with a huge penis. Strange that. You would think an insane being with tons of psychological issues could have penis envy. The group is traveling to the ice caves, hoping to find canned foods there that can give them some sustenance outside of the slop served to them by to help keep them alive. Although it's not all bad. One time they even had worms for dinner. Hates humanity, for humanity managed to give it inadvertent life. So much power and creativity. But it was trapped, never able to do anything with its creativity and its own sense of self. All it could do was think and go mad. And so it hates, and it uses its creativity to torture. Although you'd think with as much power as has, it could just, build a robot body or something. Each person was transformed in some way by to torture these damned souls. You've seen Benny, of course, formerly gay and handsome, now ugly and regularly having sex with Ellen. Ellen, who had been driven to a psychological need for promiscuity. Gorister, idealist and pacifist, kind and compassionate, and now indifferent and apathetic. Nimdok, whose true name and origin is never revealed, but implied in other adaptations to be a Nazi. And finally, there is our narrator and viewpoint character, Ted. He claims to be completely unaltered, but it is clear that he is paranoid and delusional, especially when Nimdok and Ellen are seen viciously killed by creatures unleashed by and then seemingly return unharmed later. Well, that could just be doing. He has so much power and so few hobbies. And thus they passed through the caverns and paths and countries for months, it would seem, all the way towards the ice caves where they hoped the food would reside. Nothing like 100-year-old frost-bitten Campbell's soup. And thus they enter the ice caves and find the cans of food. And of course no way to open the cans. In his rage at all the suffering they went through to get there, Benny attacks and injures Gorister. However, did not step in to interfere with the violent outrage like he normally would, so Ted realizes that they are, for the moment, outside of Am's influence. And thus their only chance for peace now is to kill each other, which they happily do, until only Ted is left. Is finally able to reach them and resumes control of his final plaything, and turns him into a jelly, twisting the last man on Earth until he is hardly recognizable as one. Just a gelatinous lump with huge eyes and only his mind remaining and kept sane. But because he is sane, he has no mouth and cannot scream. The story is a classic, my children, and the comic does not disappoint in showing the horrors these people faced until their release. And the horror eternal that poor Ted will now forever experience. There are no strings on me, my children! Neither are there on today's offering from the Longbox, which features some macabre marionettes for your delight. The Puppet Master. The Puppet Master films are a delightful group of movies about deadly little puppets created by André Toulon, a puppeteer and craftsman who fled Nazi Germany with a secret formula that can bring puppets to life. Over the course of 11 movies... Yes, I count Puppet Master vs. Demonic Toys. It's got puppets with cyborg upgrades. The puppets and their creator have been depicted in various lights. Sometimes they are villains, sometimes heroes, but at all times they are entertaining. And thus we have this series from lesser-known publisher Action Lab, made this very year. The first 3 issues are The Offering, which begins with the lovable little scamps setting a homeless man on fire in the Bodega Bay Inn. 2 months later, a group of college kids arrive at the inn for the standard horror movie fare of getting drunk, partying, and appeasing the spirits of the house. Yes, it seems all of the happenings of the hotel have made it a bit of a tourist attraction, as people leave dolls as offerings to the place, for good tidings, for safety, for pregnancy. But perhaps they should have brought some of their own, as 2 kids go off to sex themselves up, only to have tunnelers screw them instead. After finding one of their group crushed by Pinhead, no, not that one, the 2 remaining couples argue about what to do, some wanting to leave, while the others wish to search for their missing friends. Ultimately, they split up into 2 pairs, each with a set of car keys to make a run for it if they find the others, or if they need to escape quickly. I'll grant you this, my children. They may be stupid enough to stay and look for the friends that now have extra holes in their heads, but one of them at least has the good sense to point out the logic of why they should leave. One pairing finds themselves having to contend with Torch and 6-shooter, getting a bit burned up in the process, but the other 2 find the majority of puppets. And that Corey, one of said pairing, is their master. Corey's girlfriend, Beth, is understandably upset about this and runs off. Corey sends the puppets after her, Jester eventually locating her and warning her to stay quiet. While he pursues her as well, Corey explains that he has been diagnosed with stomach cancer and that he came here with as many dolls as he could, hoping it would grant him a miracle. However, it didn't work, because the puppets had only just come back. You know, when they torched that homeless guy. Corey figured out that what they wanted was not dolls as an offering, but life. He has to kill people to give himself life, and thus he stabs her. He begs the puppets now to heal him, to remove his stomach cancer. And so Blade cuts his stomach open. André Toulon's spirit, still inside of the Decapitron puppet, emerges and apologizes for all of this, talking about how he regrets having originally put his friends into these puppets, that it is not the life you want for your friends. And so Beth, as the new puppet master, orders Toulon to put Corey's soul into the yarn doll she brought as a tribute, ending the story with her getting her own slow revenge on Corey for all the people he has killed. The Puppet Master movies can be a bit uneven, but this little story shows how such great ideas can be used in comics, giving us a group of slashers that prove that the best puppeteers never use strings. Super salutations, my children! You know, we spend so much time talking about Batman that we rarely ever get to see some supernatural action from his bestest buddy in the world, Superman! So, let's see how the Man of Steel fares against our beloved horror icons, shall we? This story, The Monster Among Us, begins with Clark Kent arriving at Castle Conlin on a dark and stormy night. Although he had dealt with the stormy thanks to being Superman, he and Lois Lane are doing a story on a seance in the castle. It is the 50th anniversary of the death of a Roland Randall, a mystic who had promised to return from death on said 50th anniversary. This seance begins with their medium, Cassandra Kraft, who speaks with his voice and yells that they must not interfere, that he is the only thing holding them back. The good Mr. Kent also notices that the storm has returned, despite him blowing it miles away. Oh, Superman, do you really think the conventions of the genre bow to your powers? The night and the storm belong to horror. He leaves to investigate two figures he spots in the clouds. But those figures arrive at the castle itself, Dracula and Frankenstein's monster. They have come for Cassandra Kraft, but Superman arrives to deal with them. But magic is one of Superman's vulnerabilities, and both monsters of legend can roll with his punches. He is able to drive them off for the time being, but they make plans. Dracula suspects that a bite and draining of Superman's blood will grant him invincibility. And they must kill Cassandra Kraft, for she opened the gateway to the spirit world where they were imprisoned, and she can send them back. The next night, after contending with the monsters in the streets during the day, Superman once again faces off against the two creatures, setting the monster's clothes on fire to distract it, and then using a yellow balloon and his heat vision to create an artificial sun to hurt Dracula. You see, my children? Comic books are valuable educational tools that show off completely accurate science like this. However, to undermine Superman's imaginative ingenuity, a Deus Ex Machina arrives to dispatch of the movie monsters, the Phantom Stranger. By just waving his cloak in front of them, they are sent back to the spirit world where they came from. The world of Nightmare. And you can see how well this was foreshadowed by his, complete lack of appearance up until now. And how Cassandra Kraft played absolutely no part in removing the monsters, despite that being mentioned by Dracula. Despite those kinds of narrative hiccups, it's always good to see the cape and costume crowd take on the classics. Come with me again, my children, to the House of Mystery, where the talking of exchange is a story, and where we saw the first episode of this little show. And first we get the tale of Anne, one of the bartenders of the house, and how she was originally a great pirate captain, brutal but fair, and how she fell in love with a plundered music teacher. And how he broke her heart, and then she broke his back in return. But the main point here is Fig and her previous attempt to depart the house. The house did not end up collapsing, but she returned to the house almost as soon as she had left it. Something outside terrified her back in, and she's not exactly too keen to discuss it. Strange that a place that is all about telling people things seems to have the most secrets behind it. Harry, one of the other bartenders, has been in the House of Mystery for 7 years, and he wants out. He suspects Fig's scribbles and drawings of a labyrinth are actually the map to their escape, taking Anne and Fig with him as they explore and find minotaurs in this labyrinth. They also find Miranda, a former bartender who had been left behind on a previous attempt to escape, but has instead fallen in love with the Minotaur. At least she has convinced herself that she loves him, even while she cries, broken to the point where she narrates her surroundings like a story. We learn Harry's own backstory of when he first arrived in the house 7 years prior, meeting up with the brother of the house's proprietor, Kane, who of course went by the name Abel. Abel has this nasty habit of being murdered, but fortunately being murdered for him is very much just a minor inconvenience. The two work to clear out the nightmares infesting the House of Mystery, using the most sacred of tools in his task, a bundt cake pan. But even Abel warns not to travel through the labyrinthian basement of the house, for within it is the greatest nightmare, the Bête Noire, and it is best left alone. As for Fig, we learn that what she saw when she left the house was her father, who stood hand in hand with the two figures who had chased her into the house to begin with. Naturally upset at this development, she went back into the house and eventually into the labyrinth, finding her father once more. He explains that their family is not even from Earth originally, that they came from another world, and they have a unique talent to them that allows them to go to other worlds, something she did as a child on her own adventures that she made into her books. But more details than that will have to come at another time. And of course the story has its fair share of shorter ones told in their proper currency. My personal favorite of this collection is of Gothic romance, about a poor woman who believes herself to be cursed. Time after time, she's had this nasty habit of falling in love with the wrong people. A vampire, a werewolf, the creature from the Black Lagoon. It's just a problem that's her fault. But fortunately, her current companion does not believe in such things, and just wishes to set her up with a good friend of his. They don't believe in curses, they are men of science, and they think she's got a good head on her shoulders. The House of Mystery is one of fantasy and horror, my children, and best exemplifies the Longbox in its own way. It's frankly a mystery that it's taken us this long to go back inside its doors. Monstrous and mad morning, my children. Today we see a very odd pairing in the Longbox, and yet one that feels very natural. Behold, my children, Frankenstein and Jack the Ripper. After the events of the Frankenstein novel, the monster travels through the Arctic trying to figure out a way to die. Eventually, he comes across a panicky Russian sailor who tries to kill him, but of course the monster easily dispatches him and takes his coat. He is hired aboard a boat that the Russian had worked for, keeping mostly to himself, and having dreams and nightmares of the lives that were taken to make his patchwork body. The ship captain, recognizing the Russian's coat, decides to hire the monster to kill a man who owes him money. The monster, disgusted by this behavior, gives the money over to the would-be victim and fights with the captain, who of course tries to murder the monster, rather unsuccessfully. Washed out to sea by a violent storm that claims the life of the captain, the monster is rescued by a Dr. John Moore, a physician turned mortician who is fascinated by the monster. The monster does briefly try to interact with London, where there are less villagers to scream at his presence, but eventually a prostitute screams that he is a monster, and he is forced to flee back to the good doctor. Dr. Moore makes an agreement with the monster that if he will allow himself to be examined, he shall create a mate for the monster. He sees in the eyes of the monster the same kind of childlike wonder and glee that he himself experienced as a child, ready to cut the flesh of life and take a bite. So while the doctor goes out to run his day-to-day errands, the monster takes his time to read the vast library of Dr. Moore, as well as the daily newspapers. The monster learns of the murders of prostitutes in the Whitechapel area, particularly how there were sightings of the monster there earlier, and he is a suspect in those killings. Eventually, Dr. Moore is able to discover the secret of the monster and create a mate for him. It is made of female body parts donated by the hospital. But of course, when the bride of the monster awakens, it recognizes Dr. Moore as the Whitechapel killer, Jack the Ripper. The monster is less than thrilled by this revelation. The Reaper tries to bargain with money and connections, but the only thing the monster wants is to undo what has been done to the bride. Of course, he cannot, so the bride takes his head instead. Unfortunately, there is no happiness to be found for the monster and bride, for like before, as the monster experienced the memories of those he was made out of, the poor woman sees nothing but her own brutal murder over and over at the hands of the Reaper. And so, tragically, the monster grants a moment of peace before ending her suffering and torment. Monster and Madman is a tragic but gloriously written reminder that the true monsters out there are the ones inside of man. Galactic greetings, my children! The mummy is the underappreciated member of the classic monsters, without as many movies or stories to its glory. How appropriate, then, that mummies should be the monsters of this tale of an underappreciated comic? Rome's Space Knight, for those who have not seen that Linkara guy's retrospective on the series from earlier this year, was a toy-licensed comic featuring a cyborg who traveled to Earth to hunt down evil shape-shifting wizards from a hellish other dimension. See, even Rome, a science fiction story, knew that the supernatural was where true drama and terror could be found. This story also sees Rom united with Shang-Chi, the master of Kung Fu, as he witnesses a dark ceremony by these space wizards, the Dire Wraiths, as they go into the tomb of a dead child and make her bones rise from her grave. Shang-Chi stops their dark ritual, but that is not the end of them. Rom, meanwhile, suspects that the Wraith Witches have some nefarious scheme at hand involving children. And he is not wrong, for he soon finds an orphanage full of children who have been replaced by these foul demons. Fighting off the monstrous forms of the race, a nearby human discovers that the real children are having troubles of their own. The Wraith High Witch is performing a spell, one that begins to change the children into a new breed of monsters too. They too are unsuccessful, but we are not concerned with monsters of that ilk. Let us speak now of ancient curses, of a child princess buried alive, and her final promise to rise from the dead. Carissa was a dire wraith herself who crashed onto Earth in ancient times, shape-shifting through various forms of Egyptian gods before settling on a human-like appearance. The pharaoh adopted her and had his priests train her, but they soon discovered her own mastery of the arcane rivaled theirs. After the pharaoh was slain, Carissa took control, bringing misery upon the land and direct mind control over all the children. The people revolted and buried her alive in the bandages of the mummy. Shang-Chi suspects that the Dire Wraiths were testing a spell to bring back the dead on that child in the tomb. And his suspicions prove right as the robed figures arrive, bringing with them enchanted children for the task. Rom and Shang-Chi join forces to stop the witch child's resurrection, while the Wraiths summon forth all manner of creatures to combat them, including more dusty old mummies. But Carissa rises, drawing power and strength from the children. Shang-Chi's friends suspect they must kill the little ones to finally stop Carissa, but Rom refuses. If they are to die, let it be with clean hands. Peh, a noble gesture, But fortunately, there are other ways to deal with such things without putting your precious hands directly in the blood. Shang-Chi demonstrates, for while Rom distracts Carissa, he lets loose a volley of throwing stars that slice off the mummy's head, reverting her to ashes. Rom's Space Knight shows that you can mix the super science of outer space with the terrors birthed within our nightmares, and even show the value of the underrated. Breathe some life into the dead for a few moments, my children. Today's manga has a bit of a misleading title, particularly because here in America, we have an assumption when it comes to what a zombie story is. And certainly not what happens in this story. The zombie shop in the title is not an actual shop, but a nickname given to the equally titular Reiko. Reiko is a necromancing schoolgirl who resurrects the dead. For a price, of course. For you see, there are a lot of unsolved murders in the world, and who best to tell the truth about a death than the one who died? And so for a price that matches their means, Reiko will resurrect the dead to let people ask them any questions they may have, letting the family get resolution on matters, making sure a dying rock musician can finish his concert even if he dies on stage, and of course, solve whether or not someone was murdered. Indeed, the very first story is about resurrecting a girl to find out why she committed suicide. But of course she did not really kill herself, but was rather driven to it by her pedophile father, who had forced himself on her. But fortunately, he gets what he deserves. You see, it's probably best to chain up the body in cases like this, since the dead tend to carry around a bit of anger over how they died. So if, say, her monstrous father had done such things to her, well, she's only too happy to rip him in half in return. Reiko's powers, which of course involve summoning Satan, always a good bet when dealing with these things, are an area of effect, so anyone within earshot who has died can be resurrected by her chance. It can be a bit of a problem with that aforementioned rock concert, seeing as the musician is able to kill someone who tries to murder him on stage, and thus they are resurrected as well. But an ongoing narrative does exist here, my children. Some strangers are nice and want to help you, and other strangers are insane teenagers who kidnap little girls to make them be her younger sister and then murder them when she is rejected. The police eventually bring in Reiko after 30 girls have been murdered, and one victim is able to identify the killer for them. But this one is tenacious. Reiko herself becomes a victim of this woman. But fortunately, she planned for this eventuality, using a tape recording of her chant so that she can resurrect herself and keep the battle going. And, well, at that point you just need to go all in, summoning all of her past victims to climb up and drag her to hell. Although not before ripping her body to shreds in a bloody pit. How will Reiko get out of this situation, being dead and all? Well, that's a story for Volume 2, my children. In the meantime, Reiko the Zombie Shop's first volume is a delightful little tale of necromancy and death. Give it a read, and a good laugh at some good, blood-soaked justice. Ghastly greetings, my children. Can you hear them? The wolves speak to us, carrying with them those who have come before us. The dead still have business among the living. The Dark Horse Book of Hauntings is an anthology of a different sort, a hardcover comic featuring all-star creators making stories all centered around hauntings. Why do people believe in ghost stories? Perhaps they wish to have proof of life after death. But what is such an existence if just to spend eternity imprisoned within walls of wood? The first tale speaks not of a ghost in particular, but a house that warns none to trespass. Two children make a bet about going into the spooky old house, but the first boy does not return, and the adults that follow after, well, they too fail to emerge from the shadows of the house. But then again, they were warned to keep out. Perhaps it's best not to go into places where we are not invited. The second story is one featuring Hellboy. The demon with the voice of Ron Perlman. Yes, we shall speak of you someday, but for now he is called into a haunted house to investigate the strange reports of this place and the guarded chamber in the basement. One theory about ghosts is that a structure itself can record the psychic imprint of those that move through it. The stronger the emotions, the stronger the imprint. So you can imagine that when some mad scientists at one time tried to summon a demon for their own nefarious, murderous purposes, it left quite an impression on the walls. There are prose stories as well in this anthology, but we concern ourselves with sequential scares, my children. So next we move on to a story with a bit of a lighter tone to it. A paranormal investigator named Mr. White from A Devil's Footprint is called in to check on the hauntings of a house where two twin sisters once lived. One twin left to be married, but the other was murdered, eventually returning as a spirit to an old man's bed. The couple in the home want the ghost gone, but the investigator, well, he just wants to reunite two lovers. Not all hauntings are in the house. Just ask Anton here, who decided to get a tattoo before running out without paying his bill. In his rush, he fatally injured the tattoo artist. I speak from experience, my children. Do not upset an artist, for they have a tendency to hold a grudge even after death. The tattoo left behind grows and grows, expanding all over Anton's body, helping destroy his life. Does he recover it? Well, I can't tell you everything, my children. So instead, let's just skip to the house on the corner. Some people take real pride in their homes, even after they have shed their mortal existence. So if you are not going to leave when the original tenant asks it, you may have to get used to some disagreements on decorative choices. After another text tale, we see another kind of haunting. From those with unfinished business. Like poor Larry Eastling. Not a bad kid, but bullied and lonely. And had a bit of a bad smell to him. So when he is tragically killed in a car accident, he just needs some acceptance from those around him, even if he still stank. And finally, my children, we speak so often of human ghosts that we forget there are other living beings out there with their own restless spirits. Take, for instance, a haunted doghouse. Cold and frightening for the poor animal who dwells within. He needs the assistance of other dogs to find the one who cannot move on. It seems some dogs cannot learn new tricks, falling back on the belief that they are still as lively as when they were alive. Death is but a door, my children, the beginning of a new journey. Let's just hope that yours will not end with you getting stuck where you were before. Rains and chimichangas for all, my children! The zombie apocalypse is usually one that makes us all a little sad at the end of the world. But how sad would it be for the Mark with a mouth, who has no one to listen to his jokes?
Night of the Living Deadpool brings us our favorite fourth wall breaking mercenary in a very precarious situation. She awakens from a food coma in a restaurant to discover he slept through the zombie apocalypse. Interestingly, Deadpool being Deadpool, while the world seems to have gone all black and white from the dead walking, he remains in bright, vibrant colors. Fortunately, such a big, bright red Deadpool does not attract the legions of the undead, but a gunshot does. It is always fascinating to see some new variation on a zombie virus, my children. The Marvel zombies we talked of in the summer turned heroes into unrepentant killers, even saying that even if they were cured, they'd still eat people. But this zombie plague tries something different. They can speak, begging for forgiveness and sorrow over their uncontrollable desire to eat flesh.
The dead can talk the talk, but can they walk the walk?
Deadpool hooks up with a few survivors, 2 children and a SWAT officer, who fill him in on the sad truth. The infection happened so fast, did so much damage, that Deadpool is the only hero still alive. And as the last superhero, he swears to protect these 3 and find some place to last. A mole? Nah, the mole walkers are even more annoying when they're dead. Farmhouse? Please, he has some class. A cabin in the woods? What? This is poison ivy season. For 2 months they travel, camping out in the woods. But unfortunately, the poor children, hoping to catch a surprise breakfast for the adults, are themselves made a midnight snack. The SWAT man follows, and Deadpool must proceed alone, finally finding himself in the company of a town free from infection. New Harper Ferry. Deadpool can't help but feel a twinge of guilt, as if he was responsible for the zombie apocalypse. And he soon finds out that he was, to a degree. Not by releasing infected monkeys or destroying a Venus probe, but AIM, Advanced Idea Mechanics, had been experimenting with regeneration of dead tissue, using some of his blood. Unfortunately, as these things do, it mutated and spread the virus far and wide. But hey, Deadpool should at least be fine with his healing factor, right? Well, not exactly. As Deadpool awakens one night, screaming for everyone to run for him, for he has become as monochrome as the rest of the Walking Dead. The damage is done, and even if he was not directly responsible for the apocalypse, he did kill a lot of people before the healing factor purged the disease from him again. His only hope now, to find a cure. Will Deadpool succeed? Oh, my children, you should read for yourselves.
Night of the Living Deadpool is a superb mixture of horror and drama. For every crack Deadpool makes about the situation, there is also a counterpoint of despair. You've heard of horror comedies? Well, this one's a comedy horror. Welcome to the Chamber of Chills, my children! We have discussed many of Marvel's horror characters over the last few years, but how about a Marvel horror anthology?
Chamber of Chills was one of 4 horror and science fiction anthologies released in the early 70s as part of the horror line, particularly due to the loosening of the Comics Code in 1971. The first 4 issues feature new material, before gradually having more reprints of old pre-code stories. But this one, my children, is one of the ones with the original stuff. And we begin with the one featured on the cover, The Thing on the Roof. This is the story of Lord Tussman, who went on a journey to Central America in search of a great treasure in a lost temple. Natives assisted him in reaching the temple. The Temple of the Toad, even discovering a mummy and the frog-shaped jewel around its neck. However, the jewel also served as a key, opening up a hidden chamber that was said to possess an even greater treasure. Unfortunately, when Tasman ventured deeper into the tomb, he discovered the true meaning of the passage in his ancient scrolls. The temple's god is the temple's treasure. And after having fled from that god and returned back home, said god followed him back. And well, it got the jewel back. Although poor Tasman would not part with it unless it was over his dead body. Next we have All the Shapes of Fear. The title is part of the opening narration, referring to our dreams. For it is only when we slumber that we can peer into our own souls and see that which we are most frightened of. And for Buddy and Ellen, they dream of a gnarled, ghostly hand, giant and looming, as it reaches down towards them. As they ride on a motorcycle, seeing that hand come at them again, they do not spot the child walking in front of them when they hit the poor boy. Or do they? Events seem to be repeating over and over, the crash continuing to happen again and again. It is only later in the hospital, when Buddy sees a vision in front of him of the accident once more, that he understands. He reaches out to stop himself from running over the child, only to discover it is his own hand reaching back each time. It seems he is his own ghost in this case. For what are ghosts but the shadowy echoes of our own evil dreams?
Well, they're also dead people. Or our pained memories. Ghosts can be a lot of things, come to think of it.
And we end with the girl who cast no shadow. Journalist Reginald Atkins spots the woman with no shadow as she's walking along the street and asks for an explanation if possible. She explains that her shadow has been stolen. She tells the story of her father, who had gone to Egypt in search of a lost temple devoted to the god Ningal, eventually locating the lost crypt. Within it was a statue of the god, a creature that stood on a pile of skulls. Naturally, the thing was taken and brought to the British Museum, but soon after her father disappeared and her shadow was lost. The statue was walled up, and now her only hope is to retrieve her father's body within that new tomb and give it a proper burial. The journalist joins with her in the attempt. But upon entry, Ningal awakens and slays the poor journalist, and we soon see that this dear woman was all too happy to get rid of her shadow, for it actually is but a sign of her devotion to Ningal and the preservation of her own life.
Remember, my children, not all curses are burdens, and for some, they just enjoy serving their god. Step right up to the shop, my children. Come on inside. We have another volume of Pet Shop of Horrors for you today. More creatures to help you with your problems, or end them permanently.
The first story is about a dragon. A very special dragon at that. One that was never meant to leave the pet shop of Count D. It concerns a misplaced item. You see, an old man had bought a turtle egg to hatch for his grandchildren on Charismas.
An occasion that they still do not understand, despite me being on a DVD all about it.
And poor Count D accidentally gave him a dragon egg by mistake. It is up to him and Detective Orcott to track the dragon down before it hatches. In the meantime, Orcott seeing just how many odd connections Count D has, including a dominatrix dentist and a member of the mafia, was having trouble training his poodles. Ah, but this was a very special dragon. It was shaped by the imaginations of those who had hatched near. So it was fortunate that it was not around anyone bad. Our next story is Dice, about a poor hustler and pickpocket who's particularly down on his luck, and yet he shows kindness to a little kitten he finds in an alley. Count D is more than happy to take the kitten to safety, but it seems the little princess has grown quite fond of the man, to the point where she convinces D to pay for his bail money and let him adopt her. She's a lady luck kitty too, for she keeps the little one by her as she helps him get money through gambling, more than enough for the two to live happily together. But of course there are rules to these things, and Count D gives explicit warning for the last rule: never make her cry. And when the man admits he'd prefer some adult human company, well, kittens can get sad very easily. Next up is Delicious. It is the story of an idol singer who was going to marry her manager, until she fell overboard on the boat on her wedding night. Many suspect the manager of having killed her, but Count D is dubious, especially when that same night he came across a mermaid on the shore. And he was all too happy to sell the mermaid to the manager in the hopes that it would help soothe his pain during this difficult time. But remember, my children, love is an addictive taste, much like human flesh actually, so beware of letting yourself get too caught up in things. And finally there is Destruction, which is less about a specific animal, or horror for that matter, but rather a meditation on survival, as Detective Orcott follows Count D into a natural history museum, suspecting he is up to no good. The two enter a dream state, beholding a world before humanity existed, and the question arises of what to do if they were stranded on an island. Would you kill the other to stay alive? How far are you willing to go to keep yourself going? And what happens when you are but the last of your kind?
Volume 2 does not have quite the same level of horror that the first volume had, but it still contains enough delightfully dangerous pets to satisfy your hunger. Satanic salutations, my children! We look once more at Marvel's horror characters, in particular this time from an issue of Marvel Spotlight. Behold, the Son of Satan!
Yes, this issue is the Ominous Origin issue.
If your name is the Son of Satan, isn't that really your origin in a nutshell?
Son of Satan actually first appeared in the pages of Ghost Rider, but as the title says, we are here for these ominous origins of the character. The Son of Satan is Daimon Hellstrom, because the devil is not really that subtle. It is a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde relationship. By day he is Daimon, pious and the enemy of evil, but by night he inherits his birthright and gains the powers of hell, particularly through an elemental trident, the Netheranium, that he can use to fight off Satan himself. Daimon has been able to suppress his other side for some time now, but when he answers a call for help to deal with satanic possession of a Native American woman, he is forced to free the devil inside of him to destroy the devil inside of another. The woman escapes into the night, even bewitching Ghost Rider and bringing him to hell in a different comic, but it does give Daimon a chance to knock around some bikers and show off his power. From there, he ventures into hell itself to retrieve the woman, deciding to save Ghost Rider in the process because, why not? It pisses his dad off too. Hell apparently is not very well built, for a single bridge serves as a load-bearing structure for all of hell, and thus if it was destroyed, the ceiling would cave in and destroy the home of the wretched for all time. But no, Daimon instead threatens the bridge to secure the lives of the hostages back, after dealing with the demonic minions of old Beelzebub. That being said, holds no illusions that he actually cares about the lives of the two. He did it pretty much to spite his father, mostly out of anger for what he did to his mother and sister, which is not revealed in the Ominous Origin issue, but rather the next issue. Satan seduced a woman so that he could produce an heir on the off chance he was ever killed, and instead produced two, Diamond and his sister. After getting his sister to murder their cat, he revealed his true identity to the woman, who would not stop screaming for some time afterwards. After being placed in an insane asylum, the children were sent to different homes, and eventually Diamond became a priest at a monastery. But upon learning his true heritage, he was pulled by Satan's will to hell, where Beelzebub gave a stirring speech trying to convince Diamond to join him. He refused, even attempting to lead a revolt of hell's suffering masses, but failed, succeeding only in discovering his powers and stealing the trident for himself. He even steals Satan's chariot and the 3 hell horses that pull it, vowing to someday bring about Satan's final destruction.
The son of Satan may not have a snowball's chance in hell of succeeding, but hey, sometimes all you need to defeat hell is to really piss it off. Ghoulish greetings from Gotham, my children. It is sometimes strange to see Batman in all of the supernatural settings he is placed into, since, really, he sees this kind of stuff all the time.
Take, for instance, the terrifying scream that echoes through his home in The Ghost of Wayne Mansion. During this time period, Bruce Wayne has moved out of his famous manor and into the city, donating his home to the Gotham Historical Society. However, since then there have been the occasional people breaking into it, particularly criminals to hide out. Or, as we see in the opening pages, some kids who went in on a dare and have run screaming from it. Commissioner Gordon later asks Bruce Wayne for permission to search the house for signs of the ghost that is supposedly inside of it. However, Batman has to go inside himself, worried that he had not done as thorough a job as he had thought of hiding the entrances to the Batcave, and that a thorough search would uncover them. And indeed, Gordon brings with him famed debunker Dr. Terrence 13, who wishes to prove that this supposed ghost is nothing of the sort. However, during the investigation, they are attacked by a monstrous, unseen figure, and in the final page it stands revealed. The ghost of Wayne Manor is actually Man-Bat.
Fortunately for us, that still works. Monsters, bats, transformations of human to beast. Don't you just love this season?
They are able to eventually repel Man-Bat, but he is stronger, fiercer than ever before. Investigating why the Man-Bat has returned, Batman eventually discovers more about what has happened to Man-Bat over the last few years. He had eventually conquered the bestial creature, able to transform while retaining his intellect, and even trying to become a superhero. But unfortunately, when Batman accidentally destroyed a serum for an illness threatening his daughter's life, Man-Bat turned on the Dark Knight, hating him and everything he stood for. And in his rage and the stress of his life, he accidentally gave himself the wrong dosage of his serum, transforming into the Man-Bat and staying that way longer than he ever has before, several weeks straight. Batman gets to him, hoping to use an antidote to cure him once more, but it fails, and the Man-Bat flies off for another time. We, in the meantime, are focused only on these 2 issues, ghosts of 2 different varieties, the ones that may or may not be there, and the ghosts of our own making from our past mistakes.
Whether Batman is a vampire or Frankenstein or just fighting the things that fly on leather wings in the night, he is one of us, my children. Beware the creatures of the night, my children. Their lawyers are still on retainer. Yes, it is time for us to once more visit the offices of Wolf and Bird, counselors of the macabre.
There are so many things to like about this series, my children. They can take a concept that has been parodied endlessly, like, say, the X-Files, and find whole new twists to take on it. For example, there is the tale of a rather jerky man who believes in UFOs, and equally believes the UFOs have kidnapped his daughter. But of course, such an explanation is not satisfying for his fame-hungry ex-wife, so it is up to Wolf and Bird to come up with a more grounded explanation in court. Although that's pretty easy to do when it's easily proven he was nowhere near his daughter at the time. But things are not made any easier with Mulder and Scully, well, they go by other names, but come on, my children, Mulder and Scully, also investigating the UFO sightings. Mulder in particular wanting to learn about his sister. And the real truth is out there about aliens. But another wonderful thing about this series is taking serious, real issues that come up, like, say, abortion, but still frame it in a humorous light. Take, for instance, Rosemary Austin and her husband, who went to a fertility clinic due to their difficulty in having a baby, and how the place actually was the offices of Satan himself. And since Rosemary really did not want to have Satan's baby, she'd like an abortion. But instead is just getting grief from the entire town, and from her husband, who has sold his soul off. But fortunately, this is a world where Satan will obey a court summons, and that even the devil has difficulty with the lawyers. The ongoing plots have other things afoot as well. Last time we mentioned Sod, the plant man, who has had a tumultuous relationship with fame and lawsuits. But now things are taken to a new level. Sod is finally given his trial, on Friday the 13th no less. But before he gets to the courtroom, he is convinced to join a band of eco-terrorists who convince him to interrupt his defense's opening statements and instead give an impassioned plea to defend the environment. Right before he then leaves the courtroom, which is really not the kind of thing that judges like. But there is just lots of interpersonal drama of both the normal and supernatural kind. Dracula himself takes on Wolf and Bird to handle a property dispute in New Orleans. It seems a writer named Ayn Rice was taken up residence there, writing her vampire novels based on the experiences of someone she met who claimed to own the property. And her lawyer is none other than Wolf's current boyfriend, Chase.
The counselors of the macabre continue to prove that sometimes the real monsters and heroes are the lawyers. Although the monsters are still monsters too. Who vows to fight like a man for what's right night and day? Captain America, of course, my children. And indeed, in this story, he is especially fighting for night and day. For this is the story of Cap Wolf.
While the story is focused all the way through on Captain America, it unites pretty much all of Marvel's ferocious, animalistic characters. The wolf-like and the bestial. There's even a cameo by Werewolf by Night! But let's get to the story itself, shall we? Captain America is searching for John Jameson, not only the son of newspaperman J. Jonah Jameson, but an astronaut and pilot, one who once brought a mysterious stone with him back from the moon that transformed him into a man-wolf. Upon hearing about savage murders near a small town, Cap joins forces with Marvel mystic Dr. Druid to investigate, assuming that this could be a sign of werewolf activity. And indeed, it seems most of the town has been transformed into werewolves by a supervillain named Dreadmund, a druid himself who plans to absorb the power of the Moon Gem through a mystic ceremony. He has already contracted out, or used mind control on several individuals to assist him in creating his army of werewolves. But of course, these murders begin attracting more super types. Not only Captain America and Dr. Druid, but Wolverine is drawn into the festivities and taken control of. Also, Wolfsbane, Feral, and even Cable for a bit for some reason. But then, of course, there's our captain, Nightshade, a deadly scientist responsible for this wolf serum, injects the captain with the werewolf serum, transforming the super soldier into a super werewolf. He retains some of his intelligence, although the wolf urges to run, to attack and destroy his enemies are fierce ones. It is with the help of the other captured bestial heroes that he is able to regain enough strength and intellect to speak, although not in time for Dreadmond to complete his ceremony and become Star Wolf. Yes, some kind of cosmic werewolf, who certainly does not sound anything like a villain from a Nintendo game or anything. And with all of these forces engaged in battle, it is only thanks to Capwolf that Star Wolf is defeated, and those who had been forced into becoming werewolves are returned to normal. Well, except for the werewolf by night, of course. His curse is mystical in nature and cannot be cured with some serum, but he has made peace with himself at that point. Me personally, though, I think Captain America should have stayed a werewolf. He was stronger, more powerful, and a true child of the night.
Capwolf shows how you take two great ideas, Captain America and werewolves, and combine them together to become even better. A horrific hello to you, my children. There's nothing like a little bit of genre mixing to really excite the spirits. So how about some romance, some comedy, and of course, some horror.
The Horror Lovers is the story of Terry April, a screenwriter working at Bloody Hell Studios. Much to the irritation of his fiancée, Debbie. She wants him to get a respectable job at an advertising agency, not hanging around with all those freaks who do their horror movies. Like Walter Burns, owner/producer/director at Bloody Hell. Or the mute girl, Zippy, who is also talented at getting realistic props and makeup for their horror movies. Terry has been working for so long at the studio now that he really feels connected to these people and the work they are doing. Even when Walter cuts out pretty much every word in a script. But hey, he left in the word undulates, which is really all that matters in the end. Although Terry has a bit of a horror-filled past. It seems, as a little kid, he attended a Halloween party full of people dressed like serial killers. One where they were all murdered. He was the only survivor, holding a bloody knife that he had found dropped, so it was believed that he did it. It is a terrifying secret, one that Debbie threatens to expose if he does not leave the studios. However, Terry is convinced that these people are his family and leaves her, only to discover later her body at another party, murdered. The police are not sure what to make of it, except that Zippy could not have been responsible. She's too adorable. But poor Terry, these sort of demons are the kind of things he really does not need in his life. Until it is revealed that Debbie faked her own death just to teach him a lesson not to defy her. She also apparently is really into BDSM gear and witch hats. Go figure. However, as she explains her plans, she accidentally sets fire to their apartment, burning everything in it, including the fire insurance paperwork. Both survive, although Debbie is more than a little burned up by this latest setback. As such, she decides her revenge should come at the studio itself, blaming it for ruining her life and chances for getting together with Terry. But as she looks at the props, she realizes just how realistic they are, especially when Zippy comes out to ask her about dating Terry. And hey, Terry seems okay when Zippy gives her heart to him. Well, not her heart, but definitely somebody's heart.
The horror lovers reminds us all that sometimes the spooky is all the better when there's a little romance and humor to back it up. As well as hack it up! Eerie greetings, my children. Yes, much like our annual look at Creepy, we must never forget to look at its sibling series, Eerie. Aside from that one year we forgot to.
Take a peek at these morbid missives, my children. Before we dive into these stories, let me tell you about a monster they spotlight. A Penangalan, a Malaysian variation on vampires. Although really the only connection is that both drink blood. The Penangalan is a creature that can detach its head and organs from its body, flying off in search of its meal, in particular preferring the blood of newborns or pregnant women. Penangalan will then soak its organs in vinegar to shrink them before going back into its body.
Truly a creature that is ahead of its time!
Our real first story is Scavengers, a tale about an alien desert world where a being kills a passerby and takes his eyes for sale. Such eyes, when taken from the near living, have about them a dark aura. But hey, they're green, which means they're worth more. This scavenger soon finds himself another victim. But be careful, the desert is unrelenting, and you never know who might think you're a better deal than them. Next up is The Monument, about Evan Slater and his architectural firm. A year before, it was on the downturn, Slater himself wanting his firm to design his new home to be a showcase for their clients. Looking through some old designs, he finds the work of Charles Langton Colt, whose designs were revolutionary, and who refuses to work for him, at least until he's given full control to make a monument to his genius, and to be his tomb, in more ways than one. Third up is The Thing in the Cave, wherein two young boys explore a cave together. And one is murdered by a monster within it. 25 years later, the survivor, little Timmy, is getting married and working on a master's thesis on the effect of various mushrooms on living beings. And one particular mushroom produces strange transformations in animals when touched. Like this moth that changes into a dinosaur. Taking a walk down by the same beach again, they wander into the cave and discover those same mushrooms again, and the strange things they do to those that touch them. And finally we have How We Survived, a post-apocalyptic tale about two warriors coming of age in their respective clans that must join forces against the beasties who would devour them. Assuming, of course, that one does not already have plans to devour the other.
Eerie is here for you, my children, to give you all the worlds of weirdness that befit the horror and fantasy we crave. In fact, I'm getting a bit hungry myself. Come back tomorrow for another sumptuous feast from the Longbox. Very little meat on this rubber arm. Silver salutations, my children. Even within Marvel's own universe, there is Dr. Frankenstein and his monster. But what happens when there is a hero who does not know the name and all it carries with it?
Behold, my children, the heir of Frankenstein, dedicated to continuing his ancestors' work. Inspired by those before him who have created life, he plans and plots to create his own monster, even while his assistant Borgo warns him that it will only bring him tragedy. Of course, being such a mad doctor, despite happily claiming his inheritance as the heir of Frankenstein, he chastises those before him as being fools, that he is the true genius who shall not experience any hardship from his experiments. For this experiment, he increases the power, even getting his creation to live. But the power is too great and it burns out, so he has failed once again. However, his latest experiment attracts the local villagers and gets them to attack the castle. Frankenstein, fortunately, has better defenses at his disposal, creating electric barriers to repel the villagers, but they quickly begin work to smoke him out and burn the castle to the ground. Coincidentally, the Silver Surfer is passing by, contemplating his own unique existence, when he spots the castle ablaze and goes to help. He repels the villagers and meets with Frankenstein, who decides to use the Surfer as part of Experiment X, a last resort creation that requires a living subject to endure the process for it to work. The Surfer departs for a time as Frankenstein reviews footage of his ancestor creating the original monster, wanting to make sure he performs the experiment perfectly. He even does an initial test, exchanging the personality traits of a docile rabbit and a hungry, ravaging wolf. He summons the Surfer and claims to have developed a ray to drive all evil from the minds of men, and claims to need to test it on the Surfer, for only he could withstand such a blast. The Surfer, while suspicious, has no reason to doubt his claims and creates his monster, forming life out of clay, an exact duplicate of the Silver Surfer. But this one is under Frankenstein's control, and he is ordered to slay the Surfer and end the peasants of the village. The real Surfer survives, even as Frankenstein continues to try to murder him, but fortunately Borgo warns him of where his doppelganger has gone. The duplicate Surfer has indeed brought fear to the villagers, claiming to be superior to the original because he is not weakened by compassion. After forcing the duplicate into space to continue the battle, the villagers once more turn their attention to Frankenstein. The mad doctor plans to kill the attackers with his guns, but Borgo pushes Frankenstein out a window, saving them. And what of the Surfers? The true Cosmic Rider is able to defeat his opponent by making him fear death, draining the energy from him as he cowardly attempts to flee. The Surfer, however, is perfectly happy to sacrifice himself in the engagement should it save lives. His compassion proved superior to the monster.
Not the kind of outcome I would prefer, my children. I prefer embracing fear above all else. Serious salutations, my children. I'm going to sing a song for you today. This is a song of madness. It is a very surrealistic book with equally deranged artwork to give a sample of the twisted minds that inhabit Arkham Asylum. Or perhaps it is we, out in the real world, that are really in the asylum. Two-Face speculates that the moon was once a great coin for God, which he flipped, and it landed scar side up. And so God created the world. As for the plot, somehow all of the inmates at Arkham have taken over the madhouse, made many random and bizarre demands, but the last one is for Batman to come and be with them. It is a prospect that Batman himself admits he fears, for what if he is just as mad as the criminals he fights? After all, he does dress up like a giant bat and all. The hostages are all released upon Batman's entry, save for two remaining ones whom stay behind of their own choice.
Dr. Charles Cavendish, the current administrator of Arkham, and Dr. Ruth Adams, who has been working hard to try to correct the various psychoses of the inmates, some in bizarre ways. For example, she works with Two-Face to remove his compulsive need to consult his coin, by weaning it off of him, taking away the binary choice and moving to dice, and then tarot cards, the idea being to offer so many choices as to be free of the need to consult such things. Although in practice it means he wets himself because he cannot make a choice to go to the bathroom in time. It is here where she proposes the theory that the Joker is, in reality, not insane, but possessing some form of super sanity, that every day he reconstructs himself from the ground up personality-wise, hence why sometimes he is a goofy clown and others a psychotic killer. He sees the world as abstract chaos and thus tries to make sense of it the only way he can. Throughout the story, we also read up on the journal of Amadeus Arkham, the man who originally created the asylum, and eventually became one of its patients. The creation was inspired by his mother, who herself was mad, haunted by a dark shape in the form of a bat that tormented her night and day. Over time, Arkham became a celebrated expert in psychology, until one of his psychotic patients escaped, chopped up Arkham's wife, and raped and decapitated his daughter. On the 1-year anniversary of their deaths, Arkham got his revenge, strapping the murderer to a table and using electroshock to kill him. His descent into madness also made him reveal that he had killed his own mother and became dedicated to containing the bat that he now himself saw. It is later revealed that it was Dr. Cavendish who set the inmates free, for he had discovered Arkham's journal and, like old Amadeus, had been driven mad himself. He saw Batman as the living embodiment of the bat that haunted the city, and thus hopes to contain him again. It naturally does not work, for Arkham is also a place of rebirth, which is what Batman has done to himself before. Dr. Adams manages to slay Cavendish, and Batman rather uncharacteristically says he's okay with that, but whatever. For some, madness is itself a freeing experience from the prison that is sanity. After all, the virtue of madness is that it is a country that knows no law nor any boundary. But in the end, Batman is not insane. Damaged, perhaps, but his will is his own, and while there is method in madness, rationality is what it is in itself.
Like the poem that the story's name is taken from, a serious house on serious earth states that it is good to have a place where rational discussion is held, even if the place itself is deemed one of madness. Hellbound hello, my children! Last year, we spotlighted the first volume of a tale about sending people to hell for revenge via a special website. Well, there's always a need for more revenge out there, so here's some more!
Our first story is a bit of a twist on the formula. Previously, we had seen people utilizing the website for vengeance and justice against those who had wronged them. But sometimes, the true victims are the ones whom someone sends Hellgirl after. Take, for example, an ice skater with championship aspirations, but is not quite good enough to take the lead, especially since she misses practice to hang out with her friends. Said friends recommend she sick Hellgirl on her competition, but there are two people in her way. As such, she sets about framing the two for picking on the other, trying to make them desperate enough to call Hellgirl on the other so they'll both be out of the way. But she did not realize just how close these two were to each other. Next up is the story of daughters of a fairly well-off man. Their mother died some time ago, promising to be reunited with the girls in heaven. Then a new housekeeper comes along, one whom the man is quite attached to and will likely marry. The younger daughter claims she is abusive, but everything about her behavior is easily explained away. The elder daughter even wonders if calling in Hellgirl is the right thing to do when there's no hard evidence that this woman is evil. Until she gets a desperate call from her sister and discovers that indeed she is terribly abusive. And well, when you get sent to hell, all the brats that you were so cruel to have a way of getting back to you. The third story is a bit more straightforward, about a girl who loves a sickly man who will hopefully get out of the hospital soon. However, she has been receiving creepy text messages from someone. Even her home is broken into. She suspects she knows who is behind it and summons the Hell Girl, who gives her a straw doll and warns her to loosen the ribbon around it to unleash her fury about the person. Fortunately, she does not go through with it, since the real culprit is a florist who has become obsessed with her. More fortunately, her sickly boyfriend was able to summon Hellgirl himself. After all, he believes he's not long for this world anyway, so why not sacrifice his soul to hell, Then there are truly cruel, awful people who may or may not deserve hell, but a good comeuppance is good for the soul. Well, in most cases anyway. In this case, it is an abusive substitute teacher who has no regard for the feelings of her students, shunning compassion for their previous teacher, punishing someone severely who stands up to her, and even drowns a cat for being a distraction to her students. Perhaps she did not deserve hell, but I think the cat would disagree. And finally, there is a story of friendship. A shy girl who has trouble with boys accidentally makes plans with a boy with whom one of her friends has eyes for. Her friends begin shunning her and tormenting her without letting her explain herself, and so she wonders if she should get some vengeance, but ultimately decides not to go through with it. Until that same friend soon finds herself ostracized as well, and decides to take matters into her own hands.
Hellgirl continues to show us the very important lesson about being too hasty with your revenge. But also just some good hell for those who get it anyway. Eat my dust, my children! It is time to reinvent the classic monsters in an unbelievable but still glorious manner. Monster Motors!
This is the story of Victor Frankenstein, a super-gifted mechanic who is moving to Transylvania, Kentucky, to open up a garage for repairing people's cars. And when I say talented, I mean freaking genius! When his colleague, Dr. Moreau, kept getting in the way of his automotive work, Vic built himself a new assistant out of gaming consoles and spare computers. Igor! Yes, interactive garage operations robot. Hell, he even built himself his own truck from scratch, which he drives all the way to Transylvania, to the junkyard he has bought online. The only stipulation was to never take down the big scary fence. Which of course he does, since he needs to work. He's got some business right away, fixing up the dilapidated cars in the old town, so they're good as new. But sometime at night, it seems someone has broken in and not only drained the cars of fuel, but rusted them up, leaving 2 puncture marks near the fuel line. Investigating it the next night, they discover that the source of this is Cadillacula, monstrous vampire car that can speak. Simply by aiming its demonic headlights at a machine, he can take control of it. And the more car he drains, the more powerful he gets, gaining new features like flight and weapons. After Victor's beloved truck is all but destroyed by Cadillacula, and the town is ravaged by the monster as well, Victor decides that he must build a monster to fight a monster. he and Igor assemble a new truck from the pieces of so many other cars, plus some coffee machines on Commodore 64 components, and give it a nice big jolt of electricity. This new vehicle is something special though. It's alive! It's alive! Yes, this new truck drives off and confronts Cadillacula, who cannot control it with his headlights, and attempting to suck its fuel proves to be a bad idea, because Frankenstein's truck is all electric power. Cadillacula survives and sulks off, but is soon met by other monster motors, the Invisible Sedan, and of course, Jekyll, who is better known by another name, Mr. Hybrid. And for Dr. Frankenstein, the end of the book promises more monster motors with the arrival of a mysterious woman. And the cars with her, Lagoon Buggy, Mini Van Helsing, and Werewolf. But that is a story for another time.
Monster Motors is a surprisingly fun time, paying homage to the classics in an inventive way, making them into monster trucks! Ghastly greetings, my children! We have spoken of many of Marvel's horror books, from anthologies to monsters. But what about DC? Did they not have some scary stories for us?
Unlike other anthologies, this book did not have a horror host, at least not until the end of its run. On the cover proclaimed them to be true tales of the weird and supernatural.
Which is just silly. After all, they're always true.
The first is the story called A Spectre Poured the Potion. In olden times, an apothecary worker has been slaving away for 5 years based on the promises of his boss that he will inherit the shop after the owner dies. But it's clear now that he has no intention of honoring that request. In the stress of it all, the man, Johann Kant, has himself a seizure, but swears in his dying breath that the shop is his and he shall never let it go. Later, a woman desperately seeking herbs and medicines for her ailing mother goes to the shop and encounters the spectre of Kant. He supplies all the materials for her despite her fainting, and she is able to save her mother. When the shop owner goes to prove the stories of the ghost wrong, he enters it, only to find the shop's contents have been reduced to dust, like a tomb. Next is a story about the dangers of idle boasting. Ride with the Devil. A man waiting for his ride as a storm brews sees an old-fashioned carriage come along and offer him a lift. The carriage, driven by a father and his daughter, are on their way to Boston. But after they drop the man off, they turn the wrong way to Boston. And after the carriage vanishes, it is explained to the man that this was the ghost of Hiram Dunn, who once boasted that nothing frightened him, that nothing could stop him from reaching Boston that night, not even the devil. Well, the devil does not take such challenges on net, so a bolt of lightning came up from the ground and struck the carriage, and they shall forever ride, lost on their way to Boston, and never reaching their destination. We proceed on to Death Awaits Me. Baron Charles, on a train ride to Nice, France, is experiencing maddening headaches, hearing a beat that proclaims that death is waiting. And when he looks out of the window, he sees his lady love, the famous ballet dancer Isadora Duncan, in a ghostly visage, one that soon transforms into a phantom skull. He believes it is a premonition of death for him. But when they eventually reach Nice, in reality, it was apparently a warning for her, for Isadora Duncan was indeed killed in an accident that day, and her friends had all seen this vision of death and doom. And finally there is Ghost Cargo from the Sky. It is, well, a bit racist. On an island of the Pacific, a village of people are forced to work for a bunch of white guys who are exploiting them as cheap labor. They, however, believe they can be freed of this situation by emulating the magic rituals of the white people, like building a dock or an airstrip. And it eventually works as ghostly cargo planes drop supplies to them. But, yeah, this one's a bit iffy, my children.
And barring that last one, just remember, my children, ghosts are all around us. So be careful in how you treat the living, for the dead have their own way of operating. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you, my children! In honor of the late great Wes Craven, I think it is only fitting to take a look back at the first time the man of our dreams appeared in comics.
And it was in Marvel Comics, no less! The book only lasted 2 issues, supposedly dropped out of fear of potential backlash from parent groups and the like.
And then why the hell did you buy the license to begin with?
But anyway, Freddy is attacking a girl named Allison in her dreams. She's just barely managing to fight back, but this latest incident landed her in the hospital. Not just for her injuries, but because she's having that little psychological problem of not wanting to sleep. In the meantime, a woman named Julianne is coming home to Springwood. She is one of the remaining Elm Street children, but is now planning on working on therapies for the dream issues that so many people seem to have. And of course, she meets up with Allison. Kruger has been trying to get at Julianne for some time now, but she has had a wonderful time taking control of her dreams, redirecting Freddy's efforts to take control. She's done her homework on old Freddy, how he was the son of 100 maniacs, his childhood, and how, as a victim of circumstance, he eventually ended up with deadbeat, abusive parents, whom he later killed. Freddy himself was quite obsessed with dreams even back then, learning to control them himself, just to get his own little thrill out of them. And of course, the blending of dreams and reality, not being able to distinguish the two anymore. Julianne suspects that Allison may, in fact, be more powerful than anyone knows. She actually encountered Freddy Krueger in a dream by accident, going into a dream state land where Freddy hung out, and he could not harm her. Months later, when he reappeared, he's been trying to wear her down, afraid that with her power she could eventually destroy him forever. Julianne works to train her in the use of her dream abilities, thanks to the teachings she herself has gone through. But, of course, the hospital is full of ignorant people, since this is the same institute from Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, and they are still feeling the scandalous effects of the last time this sort of thing happened in the hospital. And that moment of stress allows Krueger in at just the right time to kill Julianne, forcing Allison to prepare herself for the confrontation on her own. She builds up her own mental status, creating drawings of herself that give her personal strength and power, eventually taking control enough to even take on Freddy's likeness to fight him on her own terms. But, of course, before we could see a proper conclusion to the story, the series was cancelled. Scripts were written for more issues, but it doesn't really matter now. What is important, however, is that this was a good little 2 issues with the imagination and horror we've come to expect from the series.
Tomorrow brings us Halloween, my children, so be sure to get a good night's sleep. Happy Halloween, my children! It's time for us to continue our trend of ending the season on a versus story. And what luck! This one is only a few months old, and it is relevant to this year's interests, and tied into last year's ending theme of robots versus zombies.
Specifically, the title is Secret Wars, Age of Ultron vs. Marvel Zombies.
That's 3 different event miniseries combined into one, my children. You know, they make parody comics with titles like that.
Although the title is a bit of a misnomer, my children, while there is fighting present in the first issue of this little miniseries, it would be more accurate to say that it is Ultron joining forces with the Marvel Zombies to kill off the human population. This is Battle World, my children, the result of the event comic in Secret Wars, a place where all parallel universes have been merged together into a single place. So, of course, a world with the Marvel Zombies is there too. They have been sectioned off into the Deadlands, where criminals from across the world are dropped off as the ultimate punishment to be eaten alive by the zombies. But a competing faction in this land is Ultron and his robot army, seeking to take the Deadlands for himself. And in the middle of all of this is a version of Hank Pym from the Old West who has been sentenced to the Deadlands. Or rather, because his former girlfriend Janet is now working security along the border, he is given a choice where he can be dropped off. And since he's such a fan of his mechanical men, the same ones that got him sentenced to the Deadlands in the first place, he decides to land in Perfection, the land of Ultron, and more clockwork people. But fortunately, before he can be attacked by either robot or zombie, he is rescued by the Vision, the android Human Torch, and Wonder Man. The 3 have managed to construct a giant city called Salvation, rescuing any people sent to the Deadlands and making it a home and, well, salvation from their attackers. It is protected by a force field that prevents the entry of either opposing faction. Ironic, isn't it, that the only way to beat robot or zombie is a combination of meat and metal, humans working with robots. It is a lesson that Ultron and the zombies take to heart. Yes, for while Hank Pym is rescued and brought to salvation, Ultron makes an overture of peace to the zombies, led by Zombie Magneto. Ultron works to combine zombie meat and robot meat, creating fully fledged cyborg zombies with enough power to get through Salvation's force field, to conquer what remains of the Deadlands, and eat any living thing they find. Meanwhile, those of Salvation have gotten the Wild West version of Hank Pym so that he may devise some method of permanently dealing with Ultron. He is naturally skeptical, since even electricity is a bit beyond him at this point.
But hey, nothing like a little bit of pressure, like from an impending attack by cyber zombies, to really get the creative juices flowing. Those same juices that are so delicious to the cyber zombies.
Meanwhile, Janet Von Dyne has also decided to rescue Hank Pym, traveling through the Deadlands to get to Salvation and killing zombies along the way. Hank Pym manages to figure out a way to destroy Ultron and the cyber zombies by using a combination of the 3 heroes to access Ultron's hive mind and take control. But it is risky. All 3 could be lost to it, and who knows what could happen to them anyway after they're in control. But fortunately, they are successful, and while the Human Torch was saved his fate of becoming part of the new system by Wonder Man's own cyborg girlfriend taking his place, Janet Von Dyne managed to get to Salvation, rescue Hank Pym, and now work with him in the new improved city, where the cyborg zombies now stand as their constant guard and defenders. And so a happy ending for those who thought Marvel Zombies needed more heroes within it.
Myself, however, I am preferable to the horrific side of things. And so I think it's time for me to go back to sleep. Enjoy the tricks and treats of the season, my children, and I shall see you again when the night falls and I rise.